สวัสดีค่ะทุกท่านนะคะขอต้อนรับเข้าสู่งานสัมมนาพิเศษกับคุณดักลาสแอบรัมนะคะซึ่งกิจกรรมในครั้งนี้นะคะจัดขึ้นโดยตลาดหลักทรัพย์แห่งประเทศไทยโดยห้องเรียนผู้ประกอบการนะคะ Expara Thailand และ Youth Business International ประเทศอังกฤษค่ะขอต้อนรับทุกท่านนะคะที่สละเวลาในวันนี้เข้าร่วมมางานสัมมนากับเรานะคะดิฉันขออนุญาตแนะนำตัวค่ะดิฉันชื่อธนันพรเศรษฐจินดานะคะดิฉันเป็นอาจารย์ประจำอยู่ที่มหาวิทยาลัยอัสสัมชัญแล้วก็ขอบพระคุณทางตลาดหลักทรัพย์แห่งประเทศไทยโดยห้องเรียนผู้ประกอบการและทางคุณดักลาสนะคะที่ให้ดิฉันได้มีส่วนร่วมในกิจกรรมในครั้งนี้ค่ะเอาละค่ะตอนนี้นะคะก่อนที่เราจะเข้าสู่ช่วงของงานเสวนานะคะดิฉันขออนุญาตให้ทุกท่านได้ดูว่าวันนี้เนี่ยกิจกรรมของเราจะมีอะไรบ้างค่ะเดี๋ยวในช่วงนี้นะคะเราจะใช้เวลาพูดคุยสบายๆกับทางคุณดักลาสนะคะแล้วก็ให้คุณดักลาสเนี่ยให้ภาพรวมเกี่ยวกับโครงการสนับสนุนผู้ประกอบการที่จะดำเนินการในช่วงระหว่างเดือนนี้เป็นต้นไปเลยนะคะถึงเดือนเมษายนปีหน้าค่ะจากนั้นเราก็จะเข้าสู่ช่วงการบรรยายนะคะในหัวข้อ Why is the economic downturn the best time for young entrepreneurs to start a business จากนั้นเราเข้าสู่ช่วง Q&A นะคะในช่วงท้ายค่ะดิฉันจะขออนุญาตให้ทุกท่านนะคะช่วยกรุณาเปิดกล้องตอนนี้ท่านยังไม่ต้องตกใจค่ะเดี๋ยวช่วงท้ายเนี่ยดิฉันจะขออนุญาตขยับแล้วก็เปิดฟังก์ชันกล้องให้กับทุกท่านนะคะท่านสามารถเตรียมพร้อมเปิดกล้องแล้วเราก็เก็บภาพรวมนะคะไว้เป็นที่ระลึกด้วยกันค่ะจากนั้นก็จะเข้าสู่ช่วงสรุปช่วงท้ายนะคะตอนนี้ทางคุณดักลาสก็อยู่กับดิฉันแล้วในระหว่างนี้นะคะขออนุญาตย้ำอีกนิดเดียวค่ะถ้าสมมติว่าในระหว่างที่คุณดักลาสบรรยายท่านมีคำถามหรือมีข้อสงสัยอะไรเนี่ยสามารถใช้ปุ่ม Q&A ที่อยู่ด้านล่างได้เลยนะคะหรือถ้าเกิดต้องการอยากจะพูดคุยกับทางทีมงานต้องการความช่วยเหลือนะคะสามารถใช้แชทฟังก์ชันค่ะเข้ามาพูดคุยกับเราได้ตลอดเวลาเลยนะคะเอาละค่ะ Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to our very special seminar with Douglas Abram. Why is the economic downturn the best time for young entrepreneurs to start a business? This event is brought to you by the Stock Exchange of Thailand, SET Enterprises, the Expara Thailand and Youth Business International in the UK. And Douglas is now ready with me. Hello, Douglas.
Good afternoon, man, and good afternoon, attendees and fellow panel members. It's good to see you all joining us on and giving up part of your Saturday afternoon to talk about why an economic downturn like the one that we're facing now is actually a great time for any entrepreneur, and especially for young entrepreneurs, to start a new business. Before I launch into the content for the program today, I want to introduce you to the program that this seminar is a kickoff for. So this program is, our talk today is a kickoff for a program that we're calling a Better New Normal Entrepreneur Support Program. This is a program designed to help entrepreneurs, especially young entrepreneurs, to respond to the historic events that we're facing in 2020, specifically the economic downturn that we find ourselves in globally and specifically in Thailand as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic that we are hopefully reaching the end of. But in the wake of this pandemic, whole sectors, as you well know, whole sectors of the economy have been very badly damaged, and there's economic opportunity has been limited at best. And our aim in this program, with the support of YBI, which is the Young Business Innovators Network, and also Google.org, which is the philanthropic arm of Google, and also SET, our partner, which is Stock Exchange of Thailand, together with Expara Thailand. Our aim in this program is to support Thai entrepreneurs and business people, helping them do what we call build resilience. So adapting their business models and at the same to the new reality, and attempting to uncover and actually find the opportunities that have been created for new businesses through the economic disruption that we're facing in 2020 and hopefully, who knows, but maybe even into 2021, unfortunately. So some of the highlights of our program. We're beginning launching the program here. This is our inaugural event in October 2020. We will be offering a range of initiatives over the next 5 months. Everything in the program is free for everybody, so it's a service being provided by us and our partners to try to help rebuild the economy in the startup and SME sector in Thailand, make it much stronger in 2021 even than it was in 2019. So we will be doing a range of events and activities, including innovation challenges. So innovation challenges are sort of an online competition where we encourage entrepreneurs and young business people to come up with and then submit their ideas for new business or new products and services in specific areas of the economy that have been devastated by the economic downturn. And these ideas will be, in effect, competing with one another. So we'll have a sort of contest between new business ideas. We'll combine online voting with our own voting and select the top ideas through each of our innovation challenges, which will then be able to proceed into free online training program to help the proposers of those ideas to develop them into real businesses or products and services. We're also offering free mini courses in entrepreneurship and venture capital in our online Expara Academy, which is Expara's online education site. You can get there at exparaacademy.com or courses.expara.com. And we're also getting ready to launch batch 2 of our Expara Vertec Global Accelerator Program, which was an accelerator program that we developed during the pandemic, which helped to accelerate companies who are developing products and services for the new normal that we're going to find ourselves in as we exit the pandemic phase. Batch 2 in this program is going to focus on even a wider range of challenges and potential threats facing the earth that we've learned about, how these can really make a big difference in our day-to-day lives through our experiences in 2020. In November, we're also going to be introducing business classes. So we're going into more detail on, in the first class, some of the biggest mistakes that we have found, especially young entrepreneurs making when they try to raise money for their new businesses in Thailand. And we're going to be continuing these business classes through March 2021. In December, we'll have our second innovation challenge. So first innovation challenge, we're going to focus on travel and tourism, which, as you well know, is one of the sectors most deeply affected by the economic downturn. In December 2020, we'll have our second challenge in food, beverage, and agriculture, which is another sector struggling mightily to emerge from the damage caused by the pandemic. And in February 2021, our third challenge, which I expect should be close to the heart of a lot of our young entrepreneurs, which is education, another sector that is experiencing significant disruption in the wake of the pandemic. And April 2021, we will be having an exclusive session for getting the right mix for building successful business with our partner SET in our evening business class. So I hope that everyone feels free to join any or all of the initiatives that are going to be part of this program. For a little more detail on our first innovation challenge, we're accepting entries from now through November 3rd. Anyone can enter, is free to enter. If you have a business idea for products and services that you believe could be successful in the future of travel and tourism, please feel free, please go ahead and submit those entries here. You can get more information at the link on this page or contact us for any more details. We'll be closing the submissions in a month from now, on November 3rd, announcing finalists on the 9th. We'll have a pitching session on the 11th and announcing the winners on the 14th of November, who will then have their choice of a range of free courses which on our Expara Academy site, which are not just recorded videos, but also include written assignments, which you'll get detailed feedback on, and also face-to-face meetings on Zoom. In November, we'll also be launching, as I mentioned, batch 2 of our Expara Vertec Accelerator program, and we're going to encourage applications from Thailand. We did have one company from Thailand at batch 1, and we're hoping to get more companies from Thailand in our batch 2 Vertec Accelerator program. More details about which can be found on our website. So that's a little bit of information about the program. I want to just take a minute to thank again YVI and Google.org and SET, Stock Exchange of Thailand, who are our partners in this program, trying to help us, to help you to build a new and better normal in Thailand for the rest of 2020 and then beyond into 2021 in the future. So thank you very much, partners and attendees. Also, I would like to thank all the participants who signed up and are joining us today, and also especially all the participants who submitted questions during the registration period. We're really happy to see your engagement and submission of interesting and relevant questions, which I will try to address some of during the question and answer session this afternoon. Also would like to invite each of the participants, feel free to lodge questions or comments in the chat or Q&A boxes that you have in your Zoom interface. I'll be happy to answer those during or after the presentation. Okay, so back to Nan.
Oh, actually, back to you. Thank you very much, Douglas, for sharing with us all the exciting ideas. We ask everybody to please help us to spread the words, get your friends to come to check out our website as well as Facebook fan page for the next happenings of all the exciting activities that are lining up. Now, Douglas, I think they don't want to hear me anymore. They like to jump into the topic. Why is the downturn the best time for young entrepreneurs to start a business? So the next hour or so is yours.
Okay, thanks very much, Nan. And I'll move into that topic now. So my primary topic for today is I call starting up in a downturn and trying to answer the question, why is now, meaning in the midst of an economic downturn and maybe in some level, one of the worst economic downturns in the last 20 or 30 years, why do I believe that this is actually the best or one of the best times for entrepreneurs, and including especially young entrepreneurs, to go out and start a new business? You might have been thinking, actually, this could be the worst possible time to start a new business because the economy is doing, many sectors of the economy are doing badly. The forecast for the rest of this year and next year doesn't look good. A lot of existing businesses are struggling, including some of the largest, most successful companies in the economy. How could this possibly be the best time for me as a young entrepreneur to launch my new business? I'm going to explore that topic for the next 15 minutes and explain why I strongly believe that that is the case. So I guess you're familiar with a lot of the companies on this list. The logos you can see here, some of the most iconic brand names in the world. So Microsoft, General Motors, CNN, Burger King, some of the most successful startups in the last 10 to 15 years. So you see companies like Uber, Airbnb, Square, Electronic Arts. I'm sure everybody is familiar with these companies, Venmo. And how are these companies the same? Now, you can probably guess from the content of my subject today, these companies are all the same because every one of these companies was founded during an economic downturn. So if you think about it this way, one way I like to very quickly illustrate this concept is the two of the most successful startups in the last 10 years are Airbnb and Uber, and these two startups were founded during the last significant economic downturn in 2008, 2009. I believe that this is much more than just a coincidence of time. Of course, many successful startups are founded not during economic downturn, but there are, I think, very important underlying reasons why we see super successful startups founded during economic downturns. So what might some of those reasons be, and especially how might they apply to young entrepreneurs even more than entrepreneurs in general? So the first reason that a downturn is a great time to start a new company, there are fewer high-paying jobs available in the regular economy or the economy outside the startup economy. And this means that your opportunity cost of starting a new business goes down significantly. Meaning what? Let's say that you're currently a university student, and maybe getting ready to graduate in the next year or 2 years, and you're thinking about, okay, what should I do when I graduate? So you have different opportunities, different choices that you could pursue. You could get a regular job, go work in an established company and get hopefully a well-paying job, or you could start your own company. This is a choice that young people face all the time, economic downturn or not. So should I go work for somebody else or should I start my own business? And one of the primary arguments in favor of going to work for somebody else is if you start your own business, you incur what we call a significant opportunity cost, meaning you give up the opportunity to have a high-paying job right out of school. Because the availability of high-paying jobs has gone down significantly during an economic downturn, that means it's less costly for you to start a new company at this time. And that's reason one. You have the same choice that you always have, but I wouldn't say the risk of starting a new company has gone down because it's still risky to start a new business, but the opportunity cost of starting a new company has definitely gone down. So you take the same level of risk, but you do so at less opportunity cost, which means that the risk-return benefit, risk-return trade-off has shifted in favor of starting a new company. This doesn't only apply to you though, and that brings us to the second reason. Later I'm going to talk a little bit about what makes successful companies, both during and not during economic downturns, and you're going to see that, you're going to hear that my number one ingredient for a successful company is the team. So the same opportunity cost reduction that applies to you applies to everybody else in the economy. This means that you will have an easier time recruiting high quality talent. Startups often have a difficult time recruiting high quality talent because why? Because the people that you would like to recruit to your company are also facing that same risk return opportunity trade-off and thinking, should I go work in a startup in which I will most likely receive a lower salary than I'm going to receive in a large company salary paying job. On the other hand, in the startup, I have a better long-term payout profile because if the startup is successful, if I'm an early employee or a co-founder in the startup, and if that startup succeeds, the shares that I will have in that startup will be worth a lot of money. So you will have an easier time recruiting high quality talent when you do your startup during an economic downturn, because fewer high quality people will be lost to you and going to big companies. The third reason that an economic downturn is a good time to start is economic downturns obviously are characterized by a reduction in demand. That's what economic downturn essentially means. Demand is reduced in the economy and GDP is going down. So, of course, this hurts every business. This hurts both established companies and new startups. But actually, it hurts established players more. Why? Established players are generating a lot more revenue typically than startups, but at the same time, they have much higher fixed costs than startups. Therefore, as demand reduces and as large companies take in less revenue, their expenses don't necessarily or will not go down in lockstep with that, and therefore they're going to find themselves in a very bad cash flow position much more quickly than startups. Startups are typically very lean and have much lower fixed costs and expenses compared to large players. Look at the examples that we can see all around us. Look at the historically super successful companies that are struggling mightily this year in 2020. Look at for example, airlines. Their costs have not gone down appreciably. Their costs have not gone down appreciably, but the revenues have dropped 95%. And they're either having to cut costs drastically or get government subsidies or even go through massive reductions, staff reductions, because they are unable to offset the reduction in revenue with reduction in cost. If you're a startup, you already have a financial plan that is based on you not expecting a large amount of revenue, so you're going to keep your costs relatively low. And the fourth and most important reason why an economic downturn is actually the best time to create a startup and why so many new companies, like the logos that you saw on my previous slide, were founded during economic downturn is downturns are disruptive, and disruptive periods of time will almost always benefit new players at the expense of established players. And I'm going to talk about that in more detail now because I think this is the most important reason that we see so many successful startups coming out of downturns which are disruptive. So what does disruptive mean? Disruptive means some event, either exogenous or an internal event that totally changes the basis of competition in a particular market. And we can have disruption caused by a new market player who comes in with a new business model, but we can also have disruptions that are facilitated by external events like the pandemic and the ensuing economic damage that it's caused. So why should it be that if a market or industry is disrupted, this benefits new players at the expense of established players? So I like to describe this situation in terms of an analogy with dinosaurs and small mammals. So if you think about the history of the Earth, 60 plus million years ago, the Earth was dominated by dinosaurs, which were hugely successful creatures. They were physically huge, and they were the dominant life form on Earth for hundreds of millions of years. They were therefore, if you look at the entire history of life on Earth, they were some of the most successful creatures ever. And who were they competing with? Who was their apparent or less apparent competition, let's say 60 million years ago, were small mammals like the one that you can see in this picture. So here you see a small mammal, which is the ancestor of modern mammals, who are the ancestors of humans, being chased by a velociraptor, which you probably know from Jurassic Park, but which was one of the very successful dinosaur predators. And this is a very similar situation faced by startups competing with large established players. So if you start a new company, what is the most likely reason that you're going to fail? Why is it that so many new companies fail? The most likely reason that your new company is going to fail is because you're going to be out-competed. Someone else is going to do better what you're trying to do, or is going to take your market or take your customers or launch a product that performs better than yours in the same market. And who is most likely to do that is not another startup, but a large established player. So that's why I call this slide, large companies usually eat startups. And if you look at the history of failed startups, you'll see the vast majority of the startups that fail in the market fail because they're beaten by large competitors. And this is a sort of natural food chain of competition. And this is how markets operate through most normal periods in markets. But what happens when there's a disruption? So of course we know that there are no dinosaurs except birds still alive today, and in one way of looking at the world, it's now completely dominated by mammals, and especially by humans. So how did that happen? How did the dinosaurs, after hundreds of millions of years of success, suddenly disappear or just transform only into birds? And the tiny mammal that you saw running from the velociraptor in the previous slide evolved into the most successful mammal species in history, humans. So it was because of a massive disruption to the environment. This is an asteroid that hit the Earth 60 million years ago and basically created a climate change that resulted in the extinction of the vast majority of dinosaurs. And who survived that extinction? Small mammals. Why did small mammals survive and dinosaurs die? And this is the exact same reason that large companies are much more sensitive to disruption than startups. Dinosaurs died during this disruption, not because they were not well adapted, because they were perfectly well adapted. Because they were the dominant creatures in the ecosystem, they were the ones that were most dependent on the ecosystem exactly as it was at the time of the disruption in order to thrive. So small mammals lived underground, and they had much less reliance on the then current ecosystem for survival. They could, for example, eat anything and didn't have to eat that much, whereas dinosaurs might have had some very specific menu of food that they could eat and had to eat a lot. It's the same thing for big companies. When an economic disruption, and especially this pandemic, which is like an asteroid crashing into the economy, when it disrupts the economy, large companies are going to be most at risk. And especially the more successful the company is, the more at risk it's going to be during an economic downturn. Why? One way to summarize this is existing companies have a powerful interest in the status quo, meaning in the same way that dinosaurs were so exquisitely adapted to the ecosystem 60 million years ago, existing companies are exquisitely adapted to the market and the sector that they're operating in, exactly the way that it runs. And the more successful they are, the more invested they are in the status quo. So that means when there's a disruptive event like the one that we're seeing now, they are going to be the ones that are hurt the quickest and hurt the hardest. As a new or small business, you are going to be competing against those established companies who are exposed this way. And I'm not going to say that this means you're definitely going to beat them, but what the disruption does is it opens up the playing field and levels it much more for small companies and startups than would normally be the case. So example, let's say bringing it back to our more day-to-day experience, some of the, if you remember from my logo slide, we saw several companies, Square and Venmo, who were in the what we call fintech sector. So fintech, everybody knows, is startups that have been disrupting the financial services sector, especially over the last 5 to 10 years. Now, is that coincidence? No. What is it? Where did that come from? Because if you remember the last economic downturn, significant economic downturn, it was caused by the 2008-2009 financial crisis. And the 2008-2009 financial crisis badly affected many well-established and super successful financial institutions, including commercial banks, investment banks. And this disruption of the financial services sector that came in the economic downturn of 2008 and 2009 created a much more level playing field for fintech startups. So we see in the US some very successful fintech startups, and here in Thailand too. We see 2C2P, one of the most successful startups in Thailand in the last 10 years as a fintech in the fintech sector. And also, if you look at the list of successful top startups in Thailand, you're going to see other fintech players, not just Thailand, but looking in broader frame in the region, you see in Singapore and throughout Southeast Asia, many successful startups that have been developing alternative products and services in the financial services industry. Before 2008, 2009, you saw very little of that. Why? Because the established players in financial services were very well entrenched, and they were in highly regulated industries, which created a very powerful barrier for startups. Post 2008, 2009, after the crisis, the regulatory environment shifted because regulators looked at maybe there were opportunities for new companies to provide services that were previously provided by banks and investment banks, because I think regulators realized and the public started to think actually the level of trust that was previously in place for financial institutions shaken a little bit, and maybe creating more space for new companies to provide financial services. And I think this is a great example of how changing the landscape opens up opportunities for new players, creates a whole new sector. And again, here we see the existing players had an opportunity to, but found it very difficult to respond to this disruption. Why? If I'm a large bank, for example, let's say another very important aspect area of opportunity for startup companies that was created during the 2008-2009 financial crisis was in cryptocurrency. There was no market in cryptocurrency before the 2008-2009 downturn. Now cryptocurrency is huge, and many successful startups have moved into this space. Why didn't the existing banks dominate the cryptocurrency sector from the beginning? Because it's very difficult for existing financial institutions to move into cryptocurrency after the last economic downturn because of the uncertainty and risk in the new cryptocurrency market. So we can see we have a exogenous crisis, which is 2008-2009 financial crisis. This hurts the large players much more than it hurts startups that are, for example, looking at launching alternative payment mechanisms or cryptocurrency-based businesses. The existing players find it difficult to respond to the new environment because they can't suddenly shift everything into cryptocurrency because they have A, regulatory responsibility, and B, reputation risk if cryptocurrency doesn't go well, creating a lot of space for startups to become the leading players in this new sector of the economy. So I think, I actually believe that the crisis that we have faced in 2020 is going to generate many more successful startups than did the financial crisis 2008, 2009. Because why? Although that crisis did disrupt the financial services sector significantly and did create space for other companies too, like Uber and Airbnb, again, I think because opportunity costs, more talent available, but the current crisis that we've experienced in 2020 is disrupting multiple sectors at the same time. So I believe we're going to see many more new business opportunities arising from the 2020 crisis than we did even from the 2008-2009 crisis. Okay, so we're going to, now I would like to take a minute. We're going to, I'm going to stop talking for a minute or a couple of minutes, and we're now going to have a poll. So we want to hear from you, participants in our program, about some of your ideas and thoughts on your feeling about what's going on in the markets and the economy today. So let's take a couple of minutes for you to answer the poll that you're seeing on your screen now, and please go ahead and cast your vote, and we'll give you 4 or 5 minutes to complete the poll. Everybody can vote. If you're having any trouble voting, please put a message in chat or in the question and answer. So you can see our first poll question is, what is your topmost concern at this moment? And this means your topmost concern about your business or about the economy or about any business that you're planning to do. So is your topmost concern at this moment funding, demand, or business model? So take a couple minutes to answer these questions, to answer that question.
Okay, I think most of the participants, last 10 seconds, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then we are ending the polling. Back to you, Douglas.
Okay, great. Thanks everybody for responding to the poll. And we can actually see the results of the poll right away. So we can see that out of the respondents to the poll who answered what their topmost concern is at this point, where there's a tie between business model and demand, and a smaller percentage of respondents cited funding. So definitely business model and demand are topmost concern for our participants in today's program, which makes a lot of sense, and it's very consistent with our topic for today, which is how to start a successful company during a downturn. Okay, so we had, before I start on my second portion, there were a bunch of questions that were submitted by participants who signed up for the program, and the most common question was, what do I need to do if I want to create a successful new business, or what are important things that will help me succeed in a new business? What sectors should I focus on for my new business? How can a student start a business? So I'm going to talk about that next, and I'm going to discuss that in my framework for what I call key steps for starting a successful business. So if you are thinking about starting a business or have just started a business and you want to understand what are the steps I need to take to start a successful business. And this is my list of what I think are the key steps to starting a successful business. And this is based on looking at a lot of successful business and unsuccessful business. So let me go through this list first, and then I'll, after I talk about steps for starting a successful business, then I'm going to answer questions, including ones that are in Q&A. Okay, so okay, so first thing you want to think about in your success in starting a successful business is developing an innovative product or service that solves a painful problem for customers. So these are the first two elements on my list, and these are the foundation of pretty much every successful company. And I think the reason that one of the first reason that so many businesses fail is because the entrepreneur who starts the business skips this first two steps. Skips the first two steps, and they go to the third or fourth step, which is they have a product that they think they want to sell, and then try to find the customers to sell that product to. This approach is always going to fail. It's impossible to start, indistinguishable from impossible to start a business that way. So if you want to start a successful business, and this is especially relevant in the current environment, so want to start a successful business, you're going to need to have what? You're going to need to have demand for your product. So if you look at why the most new businesses fail, what is the first, most common and most important reason that new businesses fail? That the first, most important and most common reason new businesses fail is because there is insufficient demand for their product or service. So the entrepreneur launches the product or service and encounters no demand or insufficient demand, meaning either nobody or not enough people want to buy the product, and the company fails. And the vast majority of new companies that fail at this point. They fail because there is insufficient demand for their product. Now, why is there insufficient demand for their product? There's insufficient demand for the product because they started either with the product or the market. So what does that mean? They have a product that they think people are going to want to buy. They just develop or introduce that product and hope that it's going to sell. Or they think that they're going to be able to create or generate demand for their product, which doesn't work and doesn't happen. Or they just see what they think is an attractive market opportunity, so they decide, oh, okay, I see some companies are selling products in this market. I can sell the same product or a better version of that same product, and I'm going to be successful. This also fails. Why? Because they didn't start with the most important element for success for new business, which is the value proposition. And what does that mean? It means solving a painful problem for customers. So when somebody talks to me about their new business idea, this is if it's not immediately obvious, this is the first question that I would ask and would want to have an answer to see the potential in their business. What is the painful problem that you're solving for customers? And if the answer is no, I don't know, or I haven't identified that yet, or it's not clear, the business is definitely going to fail. Because why? If you're not solving a painful problem for customers, then there will be insufficient demand for your product. And that's I think this is the first and most important mistake that entrepreneurs make when starting a new business. They skip this step. They skip the step of identifying a painful problem that they're going to solve for customers. Now, this also connects to our topic for today, which is why is an economic downturn a great time to start a new business? Because many new problems have been introduced for customers, and especially the situation that we're facing in 2020. The pandemic and the post-pandemic world that we're entering now, it is full of new problems that customers are facing. Because as the world changes, and especially as the world changes as dramatically as we're seeing it changing in 2020, people's needs change. And when people's needs change, they face new problems. And that's why I think not only generally is a downturn a great time to start a new business, but 2020, the last part of 2020 and 2021 are going to be some of the best times in history to start a new business. There's a whole new range of problems that customers are facing, and these problems are ripe for solution by new players. If you just look back over the last few months, you can see that the pandemic created a whole new range of customer problems that we never saw before that were the basis for successful products. For example, very simple example, face masks and hand sanitizers. These products were not at the top of anybody's shopping list in 2019, and they became some of the most demanded products in 2020. And many companies sold a lot of these products and created successful business models based on new problems created by the pandemic. Now, of course, that's one very small example, but there are going to be many much larger examples coming out of the disruptions of 2020. Second thing you need to think about is developing an innovative product that solves that painful problem. Because if it's a painful problem that can be solved by pretty much anybody, so my definition of innovative means we have solved a painful problem that others are not able to solve, meaning it's a difficult, painful problem, and we've solved it either first or early. So if anybody can solve that problem, it's likely that you're not seeing a long-term opportunity here for your new company, maybe just a short-term opportunity. Going back to my previous example, we did see a huge increase in demand for face masks and hand sanitizer, but we didn't see a lot of successful startups built on that new customer pain, because although there were a few, so if you look at who were some of the successful startups to come out of, for example, demand for face masks, one company called Mask from the US that I know was doing a nice small business before the pandemic, but now doing extremely well because of innovative face masks. So if you can have an innovative product that solves painful problem for customers, now you're going to have a solid foundation for your new business. The next thing that you need to look at when you're starting a new business is who will be the customers for this innovative product solving a painful problem? How big is the market of those customers, and how fast is it growing? So it's great that you're able to create a product that solves a painful problem, which should generate demand. But how large will that demand be? Will the demand be big enough to support a sizable, successful company? And will the market that is experiencing that demand grow fast enough to support your growth as a new business? The next thing you need to do is to have an effective marketing strategy to communicate your value proposition to the new market, to produce and distribute your product profitably to the new market, and to get feedback from the new market to help you continuously improve the product. Next thing you need to do to succeed with a new business is to be able to compete when others enter. So if you think about what we talked about so far, we have launched an innovative product, solving a painful customer problem into a fast-growing market with an effective market entry strategy, an effective sales and distribution strategy, which means that we will have signal to other companies or potential companies that there is a hugely lucrative new business opportunity. When hugely lucrative new business opportunities appear in a market, the first, second, or third players are not left alone to capture that opportunity. And in fact, they will be subject to very fast and very dangerous competition. If they are able to create barriers to entry, then they will have a chance to own that market, and if not, they won't. So this is where sustainable competitive advantage comes in, and this is linking back to the previous section where I talked about why this is a good time for starting a new business, because the ability of startups to compete with established players is extremely augmented or significantly augmented or improved during disruption periods, which we see coming on the back of economic downturn. So this is another reason where another illustration of why you're more likely to be able to do a successful startup in the wake of a downturn. After you have put in place the product market fit that I talked about in the first 5 terms, in the first 5 points here, then you're going to need a business model that enables you to sell your product profitably in the long run. You're going to need a financial plan that helps you understand how you're going to do that. And you're going to need to be able to execute in order to execute each of these successfully, you're going to need a strong team. So I call that A team. If you are a startup with an A team, then you're going to have a strong team who works well together, has complementary skill set, and is able to pull together to a common goal. If you have a B team, that means you have a weak team, which means you're guaranteed to fail. So when I like to say, when we think about the 3 most important factors in starting a successful new business, they are team, team, and team, because similar to real estate, where we see here often the 3 most important elements of good property investment are location, location, location. Why is that the same as a startup? Because location cannot be changed, and the same thing about your team. Your team is what's going to get you to success, and if you have a strong team, they're going to be able to help you do it, and if you don't, then you need to get one. So those are my recommendation of the steps that you need to take to start a successful business. These are the same steps you would take in both strong and weak economy, but you can see from the elements in the list why you're going to have a better chance to succeed if you start a company in a period of significant disruption like the one that we're seeing during the current economic downturn. So that is the material that I would like to talk about today, and hopefully everybody now has a better understanding of what is the reason that it makes sense to consider starting a new business now even more than usual. What are some of the steps that you need to take in order to improve your chances of success while doing that? And now I would like to go to answer your questions. So let's start. We'll start with some of the questions that we have got so far. There are a couple of questions. Stop sharing. Okay. There are a couple of questions that have been typed into the Q&A. So I'll start with taking a look at those questions. And now you can also feel free to type more questions into the Q&A or chat. So let's see. So, okay, so the first question, they're all very good questions in the Q&A, and I thank everybody who's asked a question so far, and in advance, anyone who's going to ask a question from now. So the first question is, says that the 2020 crisis will generate more startup opportunities than 2008, 2009, because demand and habits of people will change. But what about the fact that to start a company, I need a lot of money to start the business, and how am I going to find money during an economic downturn like this? So this is a great question. Now, I'll answer that in two parts. One is, do I need a lot of money to start a new company? Definitely, I need some money to start a new company. But I might need less money to start a new company than you might think. And how does that work? In our business, we invest in startup companies, and typically the first investment in a startup company, let's say specifically in Thailand. So I'm starting a company in Thailand, and let's say I want to start a company that matches the criteria that I showed on the previous slide. I'm targeting a fast-growing market. I want to become the market leader in that space with an innovative product. So how much money would I typically, for example, raise to start that business? Most of the companies that we work with are raising somewhere between 5 and 10 million Thai baht to start that new business. Now, is that a lot of money? Yes. But is that an amount of money that is not available for startups? I think there are quite a few sources of investment like that, that size for startup companies in Thailand if they have the right idea and a good team and a good plan for business model and are targeting the right opportunity. Now, even before that startup reaches the first funding stage, they might be able to, they will be able to take the first step. So for example, developing what we call minimum viable product before they even get to the first funding. And there are lots of other smaller funding opportunities available for that. For example, Expara recently finished working on batch 1 of the Space F Accelerator program. So Space F Accelerator program based in Bangkok, which was sponsored by Thai Union, NIA, and Mahidol University, was a 12 to 18-month program to help people who were starting new companies in the food tech space. And every company in that program got a 100,000 baht grant, with no equity, in order to help them defray some of the expenses of starting their new business. So I agree that you're going to have to, it does take money to start a new business, but I would say that there are quite a few options for startups in Thailand who are looking for that initial funding, especially if they have innovative business ideas like I talked about in the previous slide. If you want to find out more about those funding opportunities, and those funding opportunities come from both the public sector, so government agencies like NIA and DEPA have funding programs especially designed for young entrepreneurs to help them start businesses. And many of the corporates in Thailand have corporate venture capital arms that are also looking to help people start new businesses and provide funding and support. So it is also correct that there was I would say, a tightening of venture investment available for new businesses in 2020, but second half of 2020, I believe, and I have personally observed in the Thai market, that there is a loosening of this control on funding. So there's a lot more investment dollars flowing into startups second half of 2020 than there was in the first half. So I think you're going to find if you have a good business idea and you are interested to to pursue that idea, but you need funding, there are going to be a lot of funding sources available to you in the Thai market. And this is one of the services that we're going to provide to people in our program. So one of the goals of our partnership program is to help the participants in the program to find funding. So if we can help you to connect with the relevant funding sources, we also are a venture fund ourselves and have relationships with many venture funds in Thailand and government agencies that have programs for startups, and we're happy to help you to meet up with those agencies and with those investors to get funding for your business. So if you are interested to start the new business but are getting blocked because you don't have enough funding or don't know where to find funding, definitely feel free to reach out to us or to join the activities in our program, because we're going to be making a very high priority to help companies in our program to get the money to start and then raise more money to grow. So that's first question. Second question, so it says, as mentioned in the introduction part, some major major Thai business industries are related to tourism and F&B. However, they are all hit by the pandemic crisis. According to you, what type of business industry should be more suitable for launching a new business in Thailand now? And yeah, this is another great question. I would answer this with two different ways. Now, you notice one of our first innovation challenge is going to relate to tourism and F&B, and that's exactly because why? Because these sectors have been devastated by the pandemic. So what does that mean? That means that the established players are struggling mightily, like the examples that I gave during the presentation portion. And does this mean startups should shy away from that sector? Actually, I think this means there should be great opportunities for startups in tourism and F&B. Why? Are people going to eat less, because of the pandemic? No. I mean, people are definitely going to eat as much or more post-pandemic as they did before. Are people going to want to travel, post-pandemic world? Yes, they are. Now, the products and services that have been satisfying demand for tourism and F&B are very badly affected by the economic downturn. And this means that there are opportunities in those sectors for startups. And what should those startups be doing? They should be thinking about, and this is why we call our first innovation challenge the future of tourism and F&B, or tourism and travel. So think about what are going to be the new opportunities created by the disruption in this sector. So the traditional business opportunities have been radically diminished. You don't want to start a hotel or airline or a restaurant now, because those industries are all suffering terribly. But what are the new business opportunities in this sector that the large players have not focused on or not going to be focusing on? Now, I wish I could tell you what those were, but I don't have a long list of those. What I have is the interest in seeing what are the ideas that entrepreneurs have. So this is a great place for entrepreneurs to begin their thinking. Now, in addition to that, the other very interesting area, I think, for entrepreneurs who are considering starting new businesses, what other sectors should you look at? I would look at, again, new sectors that are going to be created by the changes that we're experiencing in our life. So what are some of the changes that we're experiencing? We're experiencing changes in the way we work, in the way that we communicate, in the way that we learn, in the way that we interact with others. So each of these activities and each of these areas of our lives are being radically altered. And this means new business opportunities. So I would advise entrepreneurs to think about the way the world is changing. what are new products and services that people are going to be demanding in the new world as we shift from the old world. Okay, I'll give an example from my own experience. So Expara, one of our businesses over the last 17 years has been training workshops. So we provided training workshops for many years in face-to-face settings. And we would work with partners to organize workshops and do face-to-face training. And I love to do this. I love teaching. I'm also teaching in National University of Singapore and in Sasin Business School in Bangkok, but which I still love to do. But for the Expara training business, we have now shifted all of our training activity online. So we created Expara Academy, which participants in our program will be able to access to experience our courses online, but not all recorded. So we introduce what we think is somewhat innovative concept in online learning, which is focusing on live interactive online learning. So combining recorded learning with live interactive online learning, because the education business is another sector that's being dramatically disrupted by the pandemic and the downturn. And we think that the face-to-face education business is going to be altered for all time. I don't think we're going back to the traditional model anytime soon. And in fact, what we've been looking at and what I've personally spent a lot of time on is thinking about how to make the online learning experience actually better than the face-to-face learning experience. So that's an example of how we tried to use the same approach that we're discussing here to take our business to the next level in the post-pandemic world. Okay, next question is, says, I have seen many businesses such as food delivery. They have many competitors like Grab, Lineman, Foodpanda, Gojek, Uber Eat, and so on. Even though they offer same things and have almost same business model and operation, but they are still running and competing with each other. In similar case where my business is not something new and have some competitors, how can I take advantage to get more attention from customers? But I think that's another great question. But I think if you actually, when you look at these sectors, you're going to see that there are not very many successful competitors in each of these spaces, and ultimately there will be even fewer, I believe, than there are today. So, for example, if we look at, let's look at ride sharing. So if you look at ride hailing or ride sharing, how many successful companies are there in ride sharing or ride hailing? Actually, there's only 2 in Southeast Asia, 2 in Thailand in general and Southeast Asia specific, which is Grab and Gojek. Pretty much everybody else has failed. And even Grab beat Uber. So we see Uber, who is #1 in the ride-hailing, ride-sharing business, has now basically lost out in Southeast Asia to Grab and Gojek. And I don't think we're going to see the 10 successful ride-sharing and ride-hailing companies. I think we're going to see 2. In food delivery, it's something pretty similar. I think in Singapore, we see Deliveroo and Foodpanda. In Thailand, maybe Lineman and Foodpanda also. So if it was me, and if I wasn't number one or 2 in a sector like that, if I'm going to be the 3rd entry, I would try to figure out. What is the innovative product that I can offer, or product or service that I can offer into this market that is addressing an unfulfilled customer pain. So I would use the same approach that we talked about earlier, but I would look at it in the context of the existing competitive landscape. So what are the underserved or unserved needs of the customer in the market that I could provide to differentiate myself from #1 and #2 so that I can become #1 or #2. But I wouldn't look if I was, let's say, if I'm looking at a market where there's, #1 and #2, and then there's like 5 or 7 competitors below that, I wouldn't be number 9 or 10 in this market. I think almost impossible to become successful that way. I would look at resegmenting the market so that you create a new niche in the market in which you can be number one or number two. And okay, so thank you very much for that question. And unfortunately, we're running out of time for questions. So I'll answer one more question now, which is the last question that I have in my question and answer. I see that actually two questions, so I'll try to combine these last two questions. So one is, what's the best way for students to start their own business from scratch? And two is medical tourism a good choice during the current situation in Thailand once the markets reopen for foreign tourists? So I would say quickly to answer both those two questions. I think medical tourism is definitely an interesting sector, and of course, this, as noted in the question, this is going to require reopening of travel or relaxation of travel restrictions before it becomes feasible or not. If I was looking at launching a business in medical tourism, I would apply the same framework that we discussed earlier. So what's missing in the current medical tourism market in Thailand? What is the major underserved or unserved customer pain that are not being addressed by the existing players? And then is there a sizable enough market in that segment to make it interesting? And then if so, what's innovative solution to that customer pain? And then then I can see if that's an interesting opportunity. And on the last question, what's the best way to start your own business from scratch? So the best way for students to start their own business from scratch, you first is form a team. So you should, in order to be successful as an entrepreneur, entrepreneurism is a team sport. It's not an individual sport. So you need to find at least one other person that shares the vision for your new business. And this should be somebody that you can work well with and have a good relationship with. Form a team, come up with an innovative business idea that solves a painful problem for customers. If you can create what we call an MVP, or minimum viable product, to test your value proposition, see if you get some positive reaction from early customers. This doesn't have to cost anything, or it can cost very little. So you do, which we're happy to also address in detail in some of the educational sessions that are going to be part of our initiative. So please feel free to join those. Another great way to start your new business as a student is to enter an innovation challenge like the ones that we're including in this program. So we're highly encouraging students to enter our innovation challenges so that we can help them to identify high potential business ideas and turn those into successful companies. So you have the team, you have a good idea, you get your MVP put together, and then try to get some initial funding from educational institution, government program, incubators, accelerators, or funds that invest in new businesses, and then use that money to develop the company to the next stage and then enter your formal fundraising process. So that would be my advice on what's the best way for students to start their own businesses. And I think that brings me to the end of my time for question and answer. So I'm going to now turn back over to Nan.
Okay, thank you, Douglas. I hope to the audience you have learned as much as I do. Just a quick recap ขอสรุปสั้นๆนะคะโอ้โหเมื่อสักครู่ที่ตั้งใจเรียนกับคุณดักลาสนะคะแนนก็ได้ยินคีย์เวิร์ดหลายอย่างเลยสำคัญที่สุดก็คืออย่า skip the step นะคะสำหรับ entrepreneur คุณดักลาสได้กล่าวถึงเรื่องของ demand นะคะก่อนที่จะสร้างธุรกิจอะไรเนี่ย make sure ว่าเรา solve customer pain นะคะแล้วอย่า skip the step นะคะคือคิดว่าแบบเราอยากจะขายอันเนี้ยเราก็สร้างอันนี้ขึ้นมานะคะแล้วทำไมช่วงนี้ why is the current time the best time one of the best time ที่ for the young entrepreneur to start a business นะคะหัวใจหลักก็คือเพราะว่ามันมี new problems เยอะเลยนะคะมี new problems have been introduced for the customers นะคะแล้วนอกเหนือจากนี้นะคะก็ยังมีข้อคิดสำคัญอีกมากมายเลย ว่าเราจะแข่งขันยังไงเราต้องพยายามหา niche นะคะทีนี้ค่ะขออนุญาตนะคะเข้าสู่ช่วงสุดท้ายขออนุญาตรบกวนเวลาทุกท่านอีกสักเล็กน้อยค่ะแนนอยากจะขออนุญาตให้ทุกท่านนะคะช่วยกัน participate ในโพลเดี๋ยวจะขอดูซิว่าทุกๆคนได้รับ key takeaway เหมือนกับแนนหรือเปล่านะคะ I'm going to launch the final polls for key takeaway and I'm going to ask you guys two favors. One is to help me complete the feedback and the others is to get ready to turn on your screen for a group photo sessions. So first of all, please let me launch a poll. เดี๋ยวนั้นขออนุญาตส่งโพลให้ทุกท่านนะคะเดี๋ยวนะคะขออนุญาตนะคะเอาข้อที่2ค่ะขอโทษค่ะขอโทษนะคะค่ะ Key Takeaway for today นะคะแนนกำลัง launch poll นะตอนนี้เลยนะคะขออนุญาตให้ทุกท่านร่วมกันนะคะตอบคำถามสักนิดนึงวันนี้นะคะคิดว่าได้เรียนอะไรนะคะได้ข้อคิดอะไรจากทางคุณดักลาสค่ะโอเคได้รับคำตอบเข้ามาแล้วนะคะเอาละค่ะแนนจะให้เวลาทุกท่านอีกสักประมาณ30วินาที I'm going to give you 30 seconds more and then we'll move on to feedback and get ready to turn on your camera for group photo please ขอบคุณมากๆเลยนะคะ